right, everyone. Thank you for attending another 30-day redemption. Welcome to day 7. We're going to continue part 2 of our preparing yourself and your family. Um, and we're going to go review a little bit of what we went over yesterday and continue. We have a special guest that's going to go into the conversation about money, estate, and how to talk to your mate about money, and a few other important items concerning finance. And so our guest today is Georgia Wright. We'll introduce her shortly. But we're going to begin our day 7 so that you can be informed on how to get your mind and keep your mind in the game despite what's going on with quarantines, and despite what's going on your news feed and your social media feed. Here's some good content to help you get through the conditions that's happening around us. Preparing yourself and your family, part 2. Again, I'm your host, Kashab, visionary behind the 30-day redemption. And I wanted to put this together because I believe that during this time that we're sitting, a lot of things can happen. You can slip into idle, you can slip into addiction, you can slip into depression, you can slip into weight gain. And I think that we can use our time more productively. So we put together this 1 hour segment every day to offer you something for your mind, for your body, and for your spirit. For the last 7 days, or for the last 6 days, we've been going over mind content. And today we're going to continue that with another segment. And we have a few more until the 10th. And then we're going to kick into the body segment where you can get nutritional information, exercise information, healthy recipes, etc., just to help you to have a better experience while you're quarantined. Again, we're saying till April 30th, but they're saying they don't know how long this will last. So this is our gift to you. So let's get into it. Preparing yourself and your family. Yesterday, we talked about just a snapshot of some of the basic things that one should have in their family to make sure that you are in a better position than the defaults that are offered, such as not having any resources, not having a plan. So I know some of the plans that are out there are food preparation plans, which is very good and necessary. It's a basic necessity: food, clothing, and shelter. But as some of the other nuances happen to your family, having things in place can help you to not be caught off guard. So yesterday we touched on life insurance, and our presenters Yancey and Jose gave an excellent presentation on what life insurance is and how it can be used. And today we're going to go into finance. But before we do that, and before we introduce our guest, let's take a second look at some of the basic things that you should at least consider. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a summary. We just put together a few things. So just imagine if you don't have the basic preparations, just imagine what else you don't have in place. So we highly encourage that you take good notes, pay attention, and get your affairs in order. So on this basic preparation list, we have finance. That includes budgeting, that includes investing, and Georgia Wright Lane, she's going to go more into details on that. Life insurance we covered yesterday. Emotional and social support, extremely important. We had guests on. Dr. Yoel was on earlier. We had Jabrita Shelton. She was on as well, Jabrita was speaking about trauma, and Dr. Yoel was speaking about fear and how fear has an impact on your body. Having an emotional support system is extremely important. Having your friends, your families, your confidant, very extremely important. It's a hidden thing, and it should be one of those items that you have on your list, whether it's professional or other support, to help you to get through the emotional part of what's happening around you. Legal, having your affairs in order, having your durable power of attorneys and your power of attorneys and your wills, and more of those things that will be covered. And that could be under finance, but it could also be under legal, having your affairs in order. Health and wellness, taking care of yourself, your blood flow, your nutrition, your diet, your exercise, your meditation. Okay. Um, we're going to cover some of that as we go on towards the end of the week and next week. Transportation, very important, getting around, safety, reliable transportation, um, consolidating your transportation. A lot of money is going out in insurances and car payments that, frankly, now what? These cars are sitting, the insurance is being paid, but there could be a better way of approaching transportation from a strategic perspective. Um, Protecting the legacy of the elders, the elderly. Elderly not only are a source of love, but also a source of history, a source of legacy, um, information. Is anyone paying attention to that? Health insurance, kind of obvious, but what are the options? Making sure that you're healthy and making sure that you have health insurance as an option, or how to get it, especially in worst case scenario. You could only imagine the bills that are being accumulated under the individuals or under their families. Some of these bills, especially if there's any kind of medical operation, any kind of exam, if you have a home and your home is in your name and you can't pay your bill, they can put a lien on your home and actually take your home as a means of securing payment, which is a adding insult to injury. You have COVID, God forbid, you go in, you have an examination, you're hospitalized, you don't have proper insurance. For some people who have lost loved ones, you lose a loved one and then they come for your home. Have to have your affairs in order. Arts and creative, we covered that yesterday as far as how important the arts and creative is in helping you to cope and being a source of soothing content to help you to get through the quarantine or in general. And so, and of course, business and having a business, some people call it side hustles. Every family should have a business. Every individual should have an EIN number, uh, because having that entity helps you in tax ways. It helps you in additional income. There's so many benefits to it. You should have something in place. So these are some of the basic things that you should have in place. And we'll go into details either in this 30-day or in the future. But please take note of that and try to get at least some of the basic things for your affairs in order. Besides food, clothing, and shelter and safety, you should have other things in place. So our guest, Georgia Wright Lane, is an investment advisor. Georgia has many years of experience in this field, as far as insurances, as far as financial planning, estate planning. Great friend of mine, and she will help you prepare yourself and your family with her segment. So I'd like to pull in Georgia, and she's going to go into greater details with you and give her introduction, give some of her background, so that you can be edified on how to get yourself and your family in order. But
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Georgia Wright Lane. I am an advisor and also wisdom wealth coach. Thank you, Kashab, for having me on today. I haven't spoken on finances in a long time because I speak on so many other things, but I do understand that this is the key. I would say that this is, other than God, this is the pillar of a family. What I'm going to talk about today, just stay with me because I don't have a structured presentation. I want to touch on a bit of everything. The money talk, it's a real talk. It's a talk we have to have, whether you're single, married, divorced, or widowed like myself, whether you have children or you're caring for a loved one, whether it's a parent, adult children returning home. Everything, money has to do with everything that we do, right? So we're going to talk about money today, and we're going to talk about money in a holistic way. I'm not one of those presenters or investment advisors that use jargons and fancy words. I'm really going to keep it simple. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to keep it short and simple, as short can be. The first thing you want to ask yourself while you're in the situation of what some people call lockdown, it feels like lockdown for a lot of people, because some people are in relationships with individuals who they don't care for anymore. And so they're forced to be with someone and this person is in the household, whether they contribute to the household or they don't, this individual is there and you might need to have that conversation with them because what they do and what you do will affect each party going forward. If you are single and you have children, there are things that we're going to talk about that you should be thinking about. If you are married and you have children, there are things that we're going to talk about also. If you are married with no children, if you are newlywed, if you are at retirement age, if you're retired, there's I mean, we could talk about this for the whole day, and we don't have the whole day, but I'm just going to touch on a couple of things just to kind of get your thought process going, things that you might not have thought of before. One of the things that I have here, first and foremost, is called a Deliver the Promise Organizer. I have a few. I have about 10 or so. And so, Kashab, I don't know if you want to do some type of contest or something where the first 10 people or something to that effect will get one of these. And the reason why I mentioned this is because you won't be able to see this, but this is a trifold. It's like a little brochure, it's like a little folder. And, there's certain questions that you have to answer, but the title, everything is listed here to kind of get an individual thinking about, who is the executor of your estate if you have a will, right? Insurance, whether it's life insurance, health insurance, the name of the company, the telephone number, your attorney, your financial advisor, your accountant, your stockbroker, your banker. I know for me, even I bank at Chase Bank, but I have a relationship with a couple of the managers. I have relationships there so that when I go in to handle my business, I like to speak to those people because it just goes a little differently for me. So you'll put that person's name there, your employer's name and the employer phone number, your landlord, if you're renting, the doctor, different types of doctors. Some people have medical conditions, so they have to see a cardiologist. Or, you have other doctors that you see, whether, you might have had cancer, if you have an oncologist, your dentist. Also here, it just talks about where your will is located, your birth certificate, where it's located, where are all these documents located. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole, this entire organizer, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that we don't think about, right? So this says here the estate, for the estate of. I have one upstairs and it has my name on it, my social security number, my date of birth, place of birth, my mother's maiden name, my passport number, visa number where applicable. Some of us are permanent residents, driver's license number, healthcare ID, group number, blood type, organ donor if you are, employer name, hire date, employee ID, human resources contact, telephone number, and of course it says your life insurance company, policy ID number, contact name. Some people have insurance agents and financial advisors. They don't have one and the same. It's two different individuals. And long-term care insurance company for individuals who have long-term care. Now, the reason why I touched on this real quickly is because as we're talking, I really want, as I'm speaking, I'd like for you to think about these things. We all should have a notepad, taking notes, because the conversation is going to be different for everyone. So, just eat the meat and spit out the bones. Everything that I say might not apply to you, and you might think, I knew that already, but there's someone here who, a light bulb will go off, right? The money talk, it is so difficult. The number one reason why people get divorced is due to finances, right? So for example, you get married, you have a two income household. Your husband is making great money or your wife is making great money. You guys look at your funds, you're like, yeah, we can have a pretty good life with this. But one person becomes unemployed or underemployed. Things get a little tight. The relationship is not as lovey-dovey and warm and fuzzy anymore because you can't take the trips that you're accustomed to taking. Can't go to the places that you're accustomed to going to, on vacation. Your bills are due. You have now children, daycare, babysitting, food. Initially when we sit down to do our budget, we always feel like, yeah, I could pay my bills, but I'm telling you, the minute an emergency strike, especially in the situation that we're living in now. A lot of people are feeling it. I spoke to my girlfriend today, one of my best friends in Texas, and she told me that, 10 million people filed for unemployment. I haven't been keeping track of the numbers. I do know it's several million, but 10 million people filed for unemployment. What does that mean? If you were making $100,000 a year, unemployment is not going to pay you $100,000 for a year. Most of us are living on all of our incomes, where at the end of the month, there's not a whole lot left over. And I'm not saying that you are that person or that you're struggling financially. I'm just saying, generally speaking, statistics have shown, the numbers have shown that that thousands, millions of people do not have more than $25,000 in their 401k or retirement plans at their job. People are struggling to pay their mortgages and their rent. And so on top of that, this happens. What does that mean for you? Now, for me, I have to look at my budget a lot differently. I'm self-employed, and I'm a mother of four girls, but two of them are elementary school children, elementary age children. The money talk, it's the hardest talk to have. Based on my experience, when I sit with a couple or when I sit with someone and they talk to me about their finances, I know they'll talk to me about anything else because that's the hardest talk to have. And the reason why, it's because you have to kind of look at yourself, and a lot of times we compare ourselves to others, what others have. And so we either feel inadequate. Most of the time we don't feel superior. We feel inadequate because we see what other people have. And that's why they have the term that's coined, keeping up with the Joneses. People want to keep up and they want to perpetuate success. And some of us put on a facade. And so we will drive a luxury car, where I know one young lady, her car note is $1,000 a month. She has an Infinity truck, beautiful car, $1,000 a month. That's the car note. Car insurance is like $400 a month. You're talking about a mortgage. She's paying a mortgage for a car note and she makes $60,000 a year. That's not the average person, but I am telling you, those are the scenarios that are out there. So how do you have the money talk? How do you have the money talk when you are the one who makes less money in the relationship? How do you have the money talk when you're not married and your assets are separate? How do you have the money talk? I can't tell you how to have the money talk, but what I can tell you is each individual has to look at first what their salary is. Now, a lot has changed, where if I said this to you 2 months ago, you would be able to confidently say, okay, I make X amount annually or monthly. With everything that's going on now, we don't know. The average person cannot tell you what's going to happen in the next 6 months, which is scary. So this is a scary time, but don't panic. I don't know about all the resources that are out there, but I will tell you this: before you dive headfirst into things and start stressing about the mortgage payment coming up, there are reliefs out there for mortgage owners, mortgage holders, where you can call your mortgage company. So the first thing I'm going to suggest you do is call your mortgage company. If you feel like, you're struggling, or you may be struggling soon, even if you're not struggling, even if you don't think you're going to be, just find out what's available to you, right? It won't hurt to find out what's available to you. You want to ask, what kind of programs you guys have for someone who might be having some financial difficulties. Know what your options are. The same thing with your landlord. Your landlord knows what's going on. This is not an isolated event that you're the only person who's experiencing it. So have that open dialogue with your landlord. Call the utility companies. I have to honestly say this: my conversation was not meant to start this way. How my presentation, however, I just feel led to say these things. Call your utility company, find out what kind of programs they have. Call your credit card companies. So the first thing you want to do is like damage control. What are my options before you start shelling out money? Because you still want to have something in reserve for an emergency, because you never know if you'll have an emergency on top of everything else that's going on. So find out first what your options are. Let's talk about retirement plan. If you are working and you have a retirement plan, how is your beneficiary information listed? How is it listed? Is it your ex-husband or your ex-wife? Are they still listed as a beneficiary? Is it someone who you listed, but you no longer have a relationship with that individual? Be sure to make sure that your 401k is titled, your beneficiary information, it's titled properly. If you don't have a will, I'm going to show you some quick, easy ways to kind of set your estate in order, like as a stopgap, until you can go and get a will, put a will in place. 401k, retirement accounts, 403bs, pensions. Who are your beneficiaries? Do not list your children under the age of 18. Do not list special needs children. Do not list anyone with a special needs. That will affect them getting benefits in the future from the government. Never ever list someone with special needs as a beneficiary. Speak to an attorney if you have any questions. A quick disclaimer, I do not give legal advice. I do not give tax advice. I'm really just sharing financial information that is available to anyone on the internet. That whatever I'm saying today, you can Google it and you'll find it. So if you have a tax question, the best person to reach out to is your accountant. Legal questions, an attorney, but do not list anyone with special needs as a beneficiary. Do not list minor children on your life insurance or your retirement account or any type of instrument, financial instrument that will be going to a because those monies will not go to them. It will be held for them until they're 18 years old. Can you imagine listing a 10-year-old as a beneficiary and they have to wait 8 years to touch that money? That's not very wise. So you want to make sure that whoever is listed on your life insurance is someone who you deem to be responsible. It's an adult, especially in the case of where you have children. And we'll touch on that in a second about what to do with those who have, for those who have children, especially single parents. And I won't say single mothers because there are some single fathers out there too. So you would like to make sure that you speak to human resources if you're not sure who the last person was and ask them to send you a copy of that information, the beneficiary information. So that's retirement account. Another way to circumvent having a will or an estate plan in place is making sure that your checking account, savings account, brokerage accounts, they are listed as their titles is TOD account or POD, payable on death, TOD, transfer on death. What that means is if God forbid you were to die, have premature death, those assets would automatically go to your beneficiaries and would not go through probate. Okay, so let's get this straight. Your checking account, your savings account, your money market account, your CDs, your brokerage account, non-retirement accounts, you can go to the institution and ask them to change the title on those accounts to transfer on death. Another thing you can do is list the individual that you'd like to have your assets, should you not be here, as a joint owner. That's a little iffy. That's not something I would highly recommend because now they have access to your account while you're alive. Like I remember listing my daughter as a joint owner on my account. And when I was purchasing my home, I had to get permission from her to withdraw the funds, which is kind of weird, but we didn't have a problem with that. So in the event it was somebody else and they decided to be foul, I could have some problems. So don't put anyone as a joint owner unless you know for a fact it's someone that would handle your affairs. If God forbid you don't even have to die for them to have the authority to make financial decisions. So if you're in the hospital, your mother can write checks and pay your bills, your sister, whoever that person is. So say, for example, it's your sister. She has the authority to pay bills and to make financial decisions on that particular account that you have her listed on as a joint owner. There are two types of joint owners that I'll go over. One is joint with rights of survivorship, which means when you die, they get 100% of what's in the account. It's theirs, their account. Or joint with tenancy in common, where if you can list them to be 50% owner on the account, should you, in the event you should die. So for example, you have $100,000 in the account and they're a joint owner, in the event you should die, they get 50% and the other 50% goes to your estate, right? So that's joint tenants in common. Then we'll also talk about when you have a home. Kashal will tell you to, make sure that your house is in a trust. I will tell you to make sure your house is in a trust. I have not, honestly, have to be honest and be transparent. That's something that I have not looked into. I'm looking into it, but I have not physically I haven't gone through the process. This hasn't been finalized. And that's how you protect your assets from, hospital bills, bill collectors, creditors, God forbid you get into a car accident and somebody feel like they need to sue you, or it don't even have to be a car accident. Someone gets injured on your property and they sue you. Now your home is also now up for grabs. So definitely that's something you could look into. However, if you want to circumvent the process, you can quit claim the deed if there's someone that you trust. Say, for example, my older daughter, I can quick claim the deed where we both own the home. So upon purchase of the home, or even after purchase of the home, you can get in touch with an attorney and quick claim the deed so that you guys are both owners. And then at that point, you could do joint with rights of survivorship or joint with tenants in common. The money talk, how do you have that money talk? It's hard. Coming from someone who was once married, people view money differently. Some people are scared of being poor. Some people, when they have money, the way they operate, the money is their master. And this all has to do with learned behavior. Did you have a lot growing up? Did you have a little, where the lights turned off, where did your parents, collect state aid? There are things that shape the way we think about money. A lot of times people, they feel like we didn't have a lot. We didn't have a lot when we were growing up. So I want my children to have a lot. What does that mean? That means sometimes buying things, getting things, obtaining things that we don't necessarily need, but we're trying to satisfy a void inside, the lack that we didn't have. There are a lot of times when people become very frugal, extremely frugal. I have a client who, her total net worth is about $2 million, and she's very frugal, because she was born poor, and the thought of becoming poor is really scary to her. And so she doesn't take vacation with her husband. He drove a car that was, very, very old, lived in a home where, they're like no upgrades, very, very, very frugal. And so that also has to do with the way they grew up. So the way you grew up, you really need to, before you even have the money talk with your significant other or someone who you make money decisions with, you really, really need to take a look at yourself and how you view money, and ask yourself, is money my master, or is money my servant? I'd like to see us all get to a place where money is our servant, where we are good stewards and we pretty much tell the money, okay, this is what you're going to do for me. I'm going to save here. I'm going to invest here, go to cancel, pay off debt, not accumulate more debt. We're seeing, for the first time in history, I think this was worse in 2008, the American people have a significant amount of debt, from credit cards to mortgages, student loans. That's another debt that, we don't talk about, but that's something too that we have to now factor in to the equation with everything that's going on. What I can tell you, there's good news. You can call your borrower, whoever that is, whether it's Great Lakes or Sallie Mae, whoever the your loan servicer is. Find out if there are programs available. I believe there are programs available where your student loans will be the interest free. You have to apply for those programs though, and the interest will be free, I believe, will be interest free for 6 months or 90 days. I'm not sure. This is information that is readily available on the internet, but I just wanted to point that out, that there are options available for you if you do have a student loan and every month you are making payments. You do not want to stop paying it and go into default, because that will affect your credit, right? So that's something to think about too, as we're in this this situation, this pandemic, how is my credit? How can I safeguard my credit? Like, we do not have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't believe, the attitude of just don't do anything will help us. We have to be proactive because we are going to get through this. I really do believe this, that we will get through this. And so let's come out of this smarter, more prepared, better equipped, and with purposeful and intentional thinking and planning. Something I also want to talk to people about, a few people might be on here, or a lot of people might be on here who are business owners. Have you thought about your business in that if God forbid you are no longer here or you're incapacitated, how do my business continue on? Who are my key employees? Do you have key employees? How do I pass the business on to a loved one if I'm no longer here? Most of us don't think about that. We don't think about, because we're I'm hustling, team no sleep, we get up and we're entrepreneurs and we go, go, go. But our loved ones and our significant others, sometimes they don't even know how to run our business. They don't know who our key contacts are. They don't know what to do in the event we're not here. That's a conversation that we should be having with those people close to us who we know will benefit from the business that we have. Let's talk about, I'm jumping around a little bit, but let's talk about a little estate planning in terms of a living will. You can have a basic living will. If you don't have a certain amount of assets or a certain type of assets, you don't need an elaborate estate plan or financial plan. You don't, because it could get very costly going to see an estate attorney. I don't know if you have an attorney, but I do know that Legal Shield, which was once Prepaid Legal, they have a program. It's basic, as little as $19.99 a month. It gets you a free will. A free will, did you hear that? A free will. I also believe it gets you a living will and a healthcare directive. What is the will? A will speaks for you when you're not here. The will says, this is how I would like for my assets to be distributed. Now understand this, if you do not create a will, the state in which you live will create one for you. And you might not like how they distribute your assets. So for individuals who are married and did not get legally legally separated or married but did not get divorced, please understand that your spouse may have a right, or your significant other may have a right to your assets in the event that you are not here. So I know there have been individuals who have said, oh yeah, separated, we haven't been together, we haven't been together for 6, 8 years. Are you divorced? No, we haven't gotten around yet. I'm gonna let him file, or I'm gonna let her file. Think about that. If you have assets, that person may still be legally, may still have a legal right to your assets. And also to debt. Some debt is marital debt, whether you live under the same roof or not. Some debt are considered marital debt. So that's something that you also might want to think about if you were married and you did not get a divorce. As far as life insurance goes, let's talk about, I'm sorry, I digress. We talked about the will, the last will and testament. Let's talk about guardianship. And I'm touching on guardianship only because I have children, right? The person who you might want to distribute your assets or inherit your assets might not be the person who you want to take care of your children. Am I correct? We love our loved ones. We love those nearest and dearest to us. But there's some people who are not good with money, and we know this, but we love them. But we know that they would be the most loving, patient, and wonderful person to our children, but we just don't trust them to handle money, because love does not mean, oh, you handle money well, right? So think about that as you are planning ahead. Who would I like to take care of my children in the event that I'm not here or I'm not able to? Because you don't have to die to need a guardian for your children. I mean, we see people going in and out of the hospitals, And who will care for the children if you have to go to the hospital, or in the event you're somewhere stranded, you can't get back home? Who would you like to go to school and pick up the children? Who would you trust to go to school and pick up the children? And like I said, the same person who pick up the children might not be the same person who you want to invest into, to your children's future, financial future. A living will. The living will says this person can speak on my behalf if I'm not able to speak for myself. That means I'm not dead, I'm here, but in the event I'm not able to speak for myself, this person can speak on my behalf. I remember back in 2010, I was home and I got a phone call in the middle of the night asking me to meet a friend at a hospital to notarize. If you don't have life insurance, do you want to get life insurance? What type of life insurance do you want to get? For insurance, there are different types. I'm just going to simplify it and say there's cheaper, you get a whole lot more, but it's for a specific period of time. I usually suggest that individuals with young children have term, because you can buy a whole lot more insurance and not have to pay a very high premium. 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, ideally 30 years. Why? Because you have a 30-year mortgage. You want to let your loved ones know in the event you should die, pay off the mortgage or not, but you have the option. So I usually say a 30-year term. You have to think about something. You have to think about many things like education. Would I want this money to pay for my children's college education? Replace my income replacement. I mentioned before, mortgage cancellation and debt, other debts that you might have, credit card debts, a car that you might have, any other debts other than student loans. In the event you should die, you don't have to pay back your student loans. That's the only saving grace about, the only good news about student loans. But I'm touching on life insurance because it's one of the things that's overlooked. Believe it or not, a lot of people are not insured. And it's not a scare tactic. Because believe this, we're all going to die. You either die before age 65 or you die after age 65. There's no way around it. We're not getting out of this life alive. But we want to make sure that when we do go, whatever our wishes are for our loved ones, especially if we have children or someone who's dependent on our income, we want to make sure that we put the proper things in place. It's not too late to go out and get life insurance. Please understand that the younger you are, the cheaper it is, right? The healthier you are, the cheaper it is, which means if you have a health condition or you have been hospitalized or you're diagnosed with some form of illness and you take medication, it will affect your underwriting. So I'm going to implore everyone on here who does not have life insurance and someone is dependent on your income, get insurance like while you're healthy and while you're younger. The longer you wait, the more expensive it will be. Now, some people I'm sure have illnesses. Insurance companies will cover you. The premiums will just be a little bit more. So for example, if I have a 25-year-old non-smoker, of course, because if you smoke, it's more, non-smoker 25-year-old who has high blood pressure, same age, all things the same gender, it's going to be more for the individual who has high blood pressure. So that's something to take into consideration. And you will get coverage. Most insurance company will cover you, but they will charge you more, or they'll do what's called rated. They'll rate you. You won't get a great rate, but they'll say, okay, you'll get a table B or table D, meaning there were conditions that, you had pre-existing conditions and other things when you applied for the insurance. I touched on estate planning. I mentioned life insurance. I talked about retirement planning. People want to know, should I still contribute to my 401k plan if I am no longer working as a full-time employee or I'm working from home? It's all up to you. If you have a financial advisor and that's the advice that they had given you initially, that you should save X amount of dollars for retirement, then that's what you should continue doing. I'm not going to give out any advice here because everyone's situation is different. So I won't tell you to continue contributing and I won't tell you to stop. Now, if you find that those funds that you are putting into your 401k, it's better if, serving your family in a time like this, then you might want to stop contributing, because understand that to get assets out of your 401k, you know, there are stipulations. However, the government has made some provisions for where you can take monies out and you do not have to pay it back within the allotted time that you originally had. And also fees and penalties that you would pay because you're not of the retirement age. I think it's like a 10% prepayment, pre-distribution penalty, pre-retirement, because you're not of the retirement age penalty. You will not have to pay that. But check with your HR department, check with whoever has your 401k, your plan administrator, whoever has your 403b or your pension. You have to call and ask those specific questions as they are pertaining to you. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation. I hope I have touched on a little of everything. If you have any questions, once the line is open, you can ask those questions. And also, if you want to reach out to me and have a sidebar conversation, I'm also available for that.
Wonderful. Okay, Georgia, thank you for that informative presentation. I'm going to open up. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute your mic. Feel free to ask the question at this time, um, or you can raise your hands or write your question in the chat box. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. I do have a question in regards to um, the estate planning for probate or doing a will. Even if you have a will, and I don't know if you'll know specifically this question, but even if you have a will, doesn't that leave it up to the interpretation of the court? Isn't a will still able to be challenged when you take it into probate? So even though you have a will, someone can still challenge that will. Wherein with, and I'm all pro trust, so I'm asking this question to say,
Oh, yeah.
a trust is not challengeable because a trust, my understanding is, it is what it says it is, and whatever you transfer into the trust is in the trust once it's done properly. But with a will, isn't a will open for interpretation by the court?
It is. A lot of people could challenge your will. People could just come out of the woodworks and challenge your will. Your cousin can challenge your will and said that, I should have been in that will because this person owes me X amount of dollars and said, and it's so many ways that can go. You have individuals who will create a will and they have other children who do that they did not list in the will. And so even with that, you have to acknowledge those children and say that I do acknowledge that I have John Doe also and Jane Doe, and be very specific with your language. And so the will, truth be told, that's like a Band-Aid. I'm pro trust too, especially with young children and assets. A will is a Band-Aid. It really is. It's as opposed to just leaving the cut open and getting an infection. The will is just a Band-Aid. It's not supposed to be permanent. But you also have to look at what you have. Sometimes you go to see an estate attorney and it costs a lot of money and you're like, is it even worth it? But I think it's just different for a lot of people. But my daughter, who is 23 years old, has a will. She's 23. She doesn't have a whole lot of assets, but God forbid something should happen. I mean, at least she has something. Now, as she accumulates assets and investments and she's doing other things, and yeah, I would suggest that she get a trust.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question from Barbie Batty. She says, is investing into stocks recommended? Is stock a good financial investment to have for oneself and or family?
Stocks are not one size fit all. In my years as a financial advisor, I have been licensed since 1999. I used to be a stockbroker. And what I find with stocks, it's like certain types of food. You have to have an appetite for it or a taste for it. Not for everyone. And I always caution people to first do their research, Because the people have called me before and say, hey, Georgia, do you have any stock tips for me? What do you think I should do right now? I'm like, truth be told, I don't know. There are hundreds of companies out there. I don't know what their price per earning is. I don't know what their earnings per share is. I don't know. I don't know what the analysts are saying. I don't know if they came back below earning, the forecast that was set, if they came back below or above earnings. I can't say. So I always say to people, do your research first and diversify. One of the reasons why I never really was pro stocks, because my demographic of individuals who I work with, they were mainly of the pre-retirement age of about 50 to 55, and their focus and objective was preservation of capital, retirement. They want growth, but they wanted almost no volatility. And so it leaned me more towards investments that would preserve capital, give income, some guarantees. With stocks, it's like I compare stocks to mutual funds. Stock is like having a big window pane. You throw a ball through it, it breaks the window pane, that's it. Mutual funds, you have a window with like 12 different panes, right? You break one of the panes, you replace that pane. So with stocks, with volatility, investors are very emotional. So some of the time when you see the stock market behaving the way it is and you see the volatility, people are not making rational decisions. I mean, I know individuals who took monies out of their 401k when the market went down. What do? Take it out, put it back in, people think they could time the market. And so I stay away from stocks, but I will say that I do have an account where I trade stocks, but I don't, that's not something I do readily. I think long term, if you're thinking long term, buy and hold, stocks is it's a way to go. But if you're thinking about flipping and making money, it gets a little tricky because you might have a couple of off days or off weeks or off months.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see the CG, I'm sorry, has a question. Can you unmute your mic if you do? And go ahead. If you're speaking, you might still be muted on your end. So your mic is unmuted, but if you unmute your phone, you go ahead. Okay, we can come back to you, CG. We have another question in the chat box from Alexandra. She says, are there different types of trust? Is a ladybug deed like a trust?
Is a what?
Ladybug deed like a trust.
Honestly, I'm not familiar with the different types of trust. It's not my forte. The simplest of trust that I know of that I can speak on is just a pour over trust. And it just pretty much says, it's like the will and the trust. It's just like a little sophisticated will. Are you familiar with that one, Kashab? The pour over trust? It's just like a step above a will. But in terms of the different types of trust,
There are so many, and and I'm not a financial planner, but I am familiar with. There are numerous types of trusts.
yeah, irrevocable, revocable.
Correct, but there's also statutory trust, and then there's common law trust, and just knowing that alone, when you fall into the statutory trust space, that means it falls under the state, and they kind of have standard trust and rules. Some trusts, after you die, the trust after a certain period of time, the trust goes away. So just knowing those rules alone, very complicated. There's something called a constructive trust. You can activate a trust verbally. And we have to know that. And just kind of on a spiritual side, like you could activate a trust with your mouth. You could activate a trust in court. You could make a judge a trustee. It's so many different layers to it. But they are different types, and I think that's a more intensive conversation. Maybe in the future, we will have a conversation on the different types of trust. But there are, to answer your question. But as far as a ladybug deed, I don't know specifically what that is, so I can't really speak on it. But a deed and a trust, only similarity between a deed and a trust is when you are closing, and maybe I could touch on this a little bit. When you close on a house, and this is something I think everyone needs to know. When you close on a house, you are not a homeowner. when you close on a house, unless you're paying cash for that house goes into a deed of trust.
Yep.
So for people who don't really deal with trust, you deal with trust every day. Um, a trust is activated when you sign a loan document, and the bank essentially takes your house and your paperwork and put it into a trust, and that trust is governed by rules that
Mhm.
once you finish paying, then you will get your money. And then it takes it another layer, and then they take all of those deeds similar to yours and they pool it together into one instrument, and then sells that to other people to invest in on the bond market. So you are already engaged in a trust if you're a home owner, but legally you're not a homeowner. You have a equitable right to the property because you're putting money in, and the bank has legal right to the
Mhm.
property. And until you finish paying off whatever that amount is at the bottom line of your statement, you are not a homeowner.
Mhm.
You are a sophisticated renter.
Yep.
Okay, and that's unfortunate, but that's how the rule. That's how the game is played. Okay. Have another question. CG posted. He says you mentioned trust is a good idea when you have small children. What other topics would you consider for single parents with children under 18 years of age? Um, is that question directed to Georgia, or is that question directed to us in general? CG, can you clarify? And when you say other topics, would you consider other topics for conversations for single mothers for Georgia? Okay, so that question is for you, Georgia. And CG, if you could clarify when you say topics. Okay, so the question was, you mentioned trust is a good idea when you have small children. What other topics would you consider for single parents with regards to children under 18 years old, Georgia?
Guardianship. That was an eye opener for me because I was married, right? And then I became a widow. And I remember one day I was flying out and it just hit me like, oh my gosh, you're flying, you're traveling. And what if you never come back home? And then I thought of the people who might want to raise my children, I might not want to have raised my children. And that was a wake up call for me. So I'm sharing with you my personal story. I literally like just draft up a letter and got it notarized. And I listed who would be the first choice. Then I listed in order of importance three other sets of people who were married. Two of them were couples married with children and godparents to my children. And then I asked those people before I got the letter notarized, would you be the guardian for my children if God forbid something were to happen to me? And they all said yes. So you also have to make sure these individuals are also on board. And then I also asked my daughter to mail the original to my attorney so she would have it on file because it was kind of hard to get her involved in the process. And this was hours before I left for my trip. And each individual who I asked, I sent them a copy of the letter, also the notarized letter, and my daughter has a copy. That's not the way to do it. That was just something I put in place because I have to go back and readdress that. But what I just want you to know is that's one of the key things as a single parent. The person who will come for your children, sometimes they're usually not the ones who you want to have your children. And then you have court battles, and the children are in the middle of this court battle and this tug of war of who wants them and who should have them. Does that answer your question?
Does that answer your question, CJ? Yes. Okay. Um, one more thing that I may add that is good to have is power of attorney, durable power of attorney on your children that are 18 or over. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they turn 18, sign this document, and give me a
Yep.
copy of your ID.
Yes.
And that's if you have a good relationship with them. It gives you the ability to do things on their behalf, especially if they're in college, etc. It just gives
Yep.
you, as a parent, um, a second eye on their affairs, especially if you have children that are in order. If you have children that are out of order, make them sign too. I'm just kidding, but the idea is you want to have some kind of voice in on your
Yes.
children because other people will come in, and then especially if you have special needs children over 18, let them sign it because you'll be surprised at the people that try to get into your children's ear once they realize they're a certain age. So
Yes.
that would be my little 2 cent to add. Georgia?
That's a great point. Great point. I had that conversation with my daughter. I just had that conversation with her. And another thing, a healthcare directive, because if God forbid your adult child, something happens, who should they talk to? The boyfriend, the girlfriend? Like, you're still the parent, but that person's an adult and they might not, they might not take healthcare directions from you for an adult child. So that's another thing too. But good point, Kashab, with the power of attorney.
Excellent. Well, Georgia, that was very informative. I hope that the audience received what they wanted to receive or needed to receive. We have to do this again, probably in more extensive ways, because I think each one of these modules need to be broken down
Yeah.
and to go more into details and probably do some workshops. But for the purpose of this 30-day redemption, I hope that the audience receives something. And I wanted to personally thank you again for taking your time out to come on and share your knowledge with us.
Well, I just hope, thank you for having me. I hope what I shared today, there was something there for everyone. There's so much to talk about when it comes to money, but this is a great time for us to really do some introspection and look at how we see money, how we feel about money, and how do we have that talk with our significant other about money.
Wonderful. Georgia, were you able to give us your contact information? If so, I can show the slide so people can have that.
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay, so let me just fire that up so that the audience can see the slide of your contact information. And if you have any questions for Georgia, um, reach out to her. She has her services. She'll break it down to you if there's any fee, etc. But I believe you can reach out to her if there's any professional services that you require. She can help you out. So I'm going to share that screen and give them the information on how to contact you.
Okay.
Okay, all. So her information is on the screen. Georgia Wright Lane, Lane Legacy Financial Group. Phone number 860-266-6265. Or shoot her an email, info@lanelegacyfinancial.com. I highly recommend you go to the website or just send her an email and just try to be respectful of the calls unless you have a definite need to move forward with something. But shoot her an email, give her a chance to get back because I'm sure there's many questions. Okay,
Yeah.
Georgia,
And
any
also,
closing comments?
yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I would love to connect with you. Also, I'm on Instagram. So you can shoot a follow. On Instagram, I'm just doing some other things there because I'm also a holistic coach when it comes to wellness, health and wellness. So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram.
Okay, well, wonderful, Georgia. Thank you so much. We will connect, and for everyone else, we'll see you tomorrow when we do episode 8.
All right. Take
All right,
care.
Georgia. Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.